Alright, so I was wearing black pants in the last video, and my girlfriend said that when I just had a black background back there, it looked like I was a floating torso, so we're wearing gray pants today. Video games are great, but there has been and always will be fierce debate over what's the best way to play them. The best part about video games is, of course, arguing about them. The console wars have always kind of been a thing since the beginning of time, aka the 70s. Back then it was Atari and Intellivision trying to one-up each other in their commercials. Later on in the 16-bit era, Sega came out with the Genesis does what Nintendo don't commercials. Nintendo then proceeded to beat them half to death with the Super Nintendo. All the way up until the 7th generation of video games with the PS3 and the Xbox 360, each trying to murder each other on stage each E3. And of course console wars are still a thing to an extent now, but I kind of feel like it's died down a bit. Like, yeah, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony are still competing with each other, but they've each kind of found their niche. Sony is still kind of where they were with just making great hardware and great exclusive games. Microsoft is kind of evolving Xbox into more of a brand around gaming rather than just a console. And to an extent, starting with the N64 and the GameCube, but really with the Wii, I think Nintendo really hasn't been competing with the other two because they've just had much weaker hardware, but still great experiences on them. But like I said, the best thing about video games is to argue about them. But I feel the main debate today isn't necessarily which console is best. The main debate today is between consoles and PC. Look at any post that mentions consoles on the PC Master Race subreddit, and you'll see people just hating each other for the way that they choose to play video games. So today I'm gonna look back at my personal history with both consoles and PC, and then try to decide which is really the best way to play video games. So I suppose I was technically alive for 300 days before the PlayStation 2 actually released in North America, but as far as I can remember, my family's always had a PlayStation 2. And I played so much of it as a kid. Snoopy vs. the Red Baron was great and underappreciated. Gran Turismo 4, we had like the big steering wheel and pedals for this one. Lego Star Wars, but of course the one that I by far spent the most time on was Kingdom Hearts 2. I played this out of all 3 Kingdom Hearts games that released on the PS2, and of course all the others, but those came later. I have really distinct memories of the TV screen that my dad installed in our 2001 silver Honda Odyssey. We could hook up the PS2 to that thing, and so many road trips I just sat in the back of the car playing PS2 the whole time. Now the PS2 is undoubtedly a great system, sales figures show that, but as far as my childhood nostalgia for video games goes, the Wii definitely takes the crown. This console was great even if you never ever went out and bought a game for it, because it came packed in with what I will argue is one of the most important games of all time, Wii Sports. I have lost countless hours just to pretending to play golf and pretending to bowl. And of course the sequel Wii Sports Resort was great, Mario Kart Wii whenever any of my friends came over for years, but none of those can compare to the best game that came out on Wii. This, to this day, is one of the best games I have ever played, and it is one of 2 games that I have ever 100%ed. And none of this is even getting into all of the time I spent with my Game Boy Advance, my DS, my DSi, my 3DS as a kid. I got an Xbox 360 with a Kinect for Christmas one year, and I never really played this one that much. It was a lot of fun when I did, don't get me wrong, but I was still at an age where my parents wouldn't let me buy any game that had a gun in it, so yeah, a lot of the Xbox 360's library wasn't really for me. So I didn't really play too many video games through middle school and high school. Don't get me wrong, I still played them, but not as much. After high school, I got a Nintendo Switch with my graduation money. I got this console pretty much just so I could play Breath of the Wild, and if that's the only thing I ever played on here, it honestly still would have been worth it. Then, summer 2019, I got a PS4. Now the PS5 was still like a year and a half off at this point, which was great because there were still a ton of great exclusive games coming out for the PS4. And the whole back catalog of early PS4 games were cheap now. If you buy them used, I played tons of those. As I said in my last video, I got God of War for $8 at a used game store. Just the PlayStation exclusives were great too. I mean, Horizon, Uncharted, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Ratchet & Clank. I could keep going. Spider-Man, how did I forget Spider-Man? I have The Last of Us Remastered on my PS4, and I will play it someday, but the first time I ever sat down to play it, it was April 2020, and I just decided this isn't the game for me right now, for obvious reasons. Since then, as I've really gotten into video games, I got games for my older consoles that I didn't get to play when they were new. Ocarina of Time, Red Dead Redemption, Metroid Prime, which has quickly become another one of my favorite games ever. My history with PC games isn't quite as straightforward. When I was little, I had a off-white Dell Dimension desktop that was probably older than me. It had this giant CRT monitor that took up most of my blue IKEA desk. I used this PC to play things like Monsters Inc. Pinball, those little games that came on DVD movie extras, Microsoft Word. Suffice it to say, I wasn't a big PC gamer. When I got a bit older, I got a laptop and I played a bunch of Webkins and Club Penguin, and I know that most people don't count these as PC gaming, but it's what I played back in the day. Bear with me. A little bit later on, I played tons of Flash games, mostly on coolmathgames.com. You know, that website that said math at the top, just so you could convince the teachers that you were learning instead of playing Bloons Tower Defense. Then one day, back in 2011, everything changed. My dad surprised me one completely random October day with a Steam account and a copy of Portal. And now this confused me at the time because I really didn't know that real PC gaming was a thing. I'm like, okay, I can play great time waster games on the internet, but if I want to play a real video game, I gotta go to the Wii. So when my dad told me that he had gotten me a game for my laptop, I was a bit confused. Like, you're telling me I could go to coolmathgames.com right now and play a million games immediately, or I could sit here and wait for Steam to download, then wait for the game to download, and then play it. And consider this was over our wimpy 2011 Wi-Fi, so downloads were long. Nah, if I want a real video game, I'm just gonna go downstairs and play Epic Mickey instead. But of course, I did end up playing Portal, which was really good, which led straight into me buying Portal 2, which was phenomenal. Now, of course, in a way, this is what sent me down a path to being who I am today, a person who owns 2 copies of Sonic Forces. But back in 2013, I took a big step towards PC gaming completely on accident. I was getting really into Blender at the time, and my laptop had crapped out a little while ago, so I was using my mom's MacBook for everything, so I needed my own computer. This is what led to me building my own computer so I could fuel my Blender addiction, and only after the fact I realized that, oh, this would be great for playing video games. So I built it, I played a bunch of CSGO and Civ 5 with my friends at the time, but this was the time of my life when I wasn't really into video games, you know, during middle school and high school. I really started to become a gamer once I started college, and then really became a gamer once the pandemic started, because, I mean, what else was I gonna do? Wait a second, that whole explanation of PC games, how did I not mention how much Minecraft I played with my friends? Nowadays, I generally consider myself more of a console gamer. This might be because I have 6 consoles and 1 PC. But to really determine which is best, I'm going to compare PC and console in a bunch of categories that I've selected, and all of the results are based on my opinions alone. To really determine which is best when it comes to graphics, I'm gonna try and be as scientific about this, even though I recognize that it's really not all that scientific of an approach. I could compare God of War on PS4 to my version of Crazy Taxi I have on PC and just say, there, look, PS4's better graphics, right? But instead, we'll use the same games on both of them. Now, I only own 3 games on both PC and PlayStation, and those are Doom 2016, Control, and Sonic Forces. We're not using Sonic Forces, so we're going to use the other 2. To try and make this as fair as possible, I set out some rules. Everything is tested and rendering at 1080p. On the PC, I set graphics to as high as possible while still maintaining as close to 60 frames per second as I could. I say that only on PC because on console, you don't really have to customize that much. On PC, you change around a bunch of the graphics settings to make sure that it can run if you have a potato computer. On console, the developers spent a lot of work out the gate to make sure it's optimized on this specific hardware, because there's not much variation between 2 PS4s or 2 Xbox Ones. So like, this is the graphics menu for Doom on PC. This is it for console. So we are going to compare my PlayStation 4, to be fair, it's a PlayStation 4 Pro, to my current PC, as well as my old PC, that one I built in 2013, because I just built a new PC, and it runs pretty great, but I also acknowledge that there's a lot of variation between PC hardware, so I kinda wanna get an idea of what it could be on pretty new hardware and what it could be on someone's hardware they've had for a while. We're starting off with Doom. It ran pretty fine on everything. On my old PC, I had all the graphics set to low, and it still didn't hit 60 frames per second, hovering more in the range of 40 to 50, but it was still completely playable. Like, if I had just this to experience Doom, I would still have a pretty good time. I really didn't notice that much difference in the visuals between the PS4 and the new PC. On the old PC, there was a lot of noticeable texture pop-in, though. So I'd be running up to something, it would be really, really fuzzy for a second, and then all of a sudden it would get sharper. I suppose I would give the edge to the PC on this one because it can hit frame rates higher than 60 frames per second, and this game looks great at 144 FPS like I've been playing it. Control was a lot more interesting of a case. Starting off, old PC, it was kind of unplayable. It struggled to maintain a solid 30. It was juddery all the time, and I had the graphics set as low as possible, which looked grainy and bad. I in fact got kind of frustrated with this one on the old PC and didn't get as far into the game as I did while recording on the PS4 and the new PC, because I just felt like shooting was harder. It was harder to line up my shots, and I was being less accurate. And again, the PS4 and the PC ran about the same. Like, they both hit a locked 60 frames per second pretty much. But the comparison between the PS4 and the new PC is more interesting on this one, because Control is one of the video games that can take advantage of NVIDIA RTX real-time ray tracing. So when you have a graphics card that can handle it, the reflections and the lighting look a whole lot better. I have an RTX 2060, which is about the lowest you can go while still handling some amount of ray tracing, and this looks great. I was hitting 60 FPS here, but not really above that, and I had to use NVIDIA's DLSS, which is a technology that renders out a smaller image and then uses AI to upscale it to the full 1080p to save on processing power. So some of the details in the backgrounds, like on this emblem here, looked a little bit weird, a little bit fuzzy, but it was still a great gameplay experience. So I think that graphics are a little bit more consistently good on console because so much optimization has been done for this specific hardware, but the absolute peak of cutting-edge graphics is on PC. I'm gonna give the point to PC here. I've had great multiplayer experiences on both PC and console, but PC definitely takes the win here. I will often choose to play a game on PC over console because of online multiplayer. I am a little wimp, so I hate Phasmophobia, but I played so much of it just because I got to play it with my friends and we got to be chaotic dumbasses. She doesn't have enough budget? That's gonna upset her.
It is. Okay. All right. I guess we just wait now, right?
Property Brother number 5 is back?
Property Brother number 5.
Property Brother number 5 is back.
Oh,
Hi.
we got it. We got to shout. Let her know we're here. We're here. Come to us.
We gotta scream.
What's her name again? Let it all out. And scream and shout and let it out.
And especially since the pandemic started, playing games on PC is pretty much where I spend most of my time with my friends. But see, PC is really great for online multiplayer. I think consoles are better for local multiplayer, so sitting on a couch together, playing a game together. The Wii especially, at least for me, was a multiplayer beast. Again, just Mario Kart would be enough. And then of course there's all the Lego games that I've played local multiplayer on consoles. Playing Lego Star Wars is some of the best memories I have, spending time with my dad growing up. And now my girlfriend and I are working on Lego Harry Potter on the PS4, and it's great. So at the end of the day, I think consoles do better local multiplayer, PCs do better online multiplayer, and online multiplayer is more important to me nowadays. Sure, consoles do have online multiplayer, but you usually have to pay for it, and local multiplayer is almost non-existent on PC, but really the best multiplayer experiences I've had for a while have been on PC. As I had mentioned when talking about graphics, you kinda have to do some configuration on PC to get the game to really run the best on your specific hardware. You don't have to do any of that on consoles. Consoles are great because the graphics are pretty much just pick up and play. The game is optimized right out of the gate. When I was recording my gameplay footage for Doom for this video, I had to look up multiple forums of how to get the game to open on the right monitor. The default for PC is a keyboard and mouse, but if you want to use anything else, it usually requires some level of configuration. And just getting Sonic Generations to recognize my Xbox controller is a fight every time. I could just hand my grandma a controller and she could get started playing Doom on the PS4. She'd suck at it, but she could play it. If I had her play the PC version, she'd have to try and figure out what the hell anti-aliasing is. She doesn't need that in her life. Now this one is interesting. On the PC, obviously your main input method is keyboard and mouse. This is fine in most cases. In fact, it's preferable in many. I really don't like playing shooters on consoles because I don't feel like I get as much accuracy as I do out of the keyboard and mouse. That being said, driving with keyboard controls is horrible and I hate it. I need to have some sort of analog input when steering just to make it work. But the great thing about PC is that most of the time you can use a controller with it if you want to. Since Microsoft makes both Xbox and Windows, Xbox controller support is baked pretty deep within Windows. And most Steam games that would benefit from using a controller do support using a controller. A lot of games support other controllers, so I just used my PS4 controller for a while. But a lot of the time on PC, it'll still show Xbox button prompts a lot of the time, even if you're playing with a PS4 controller, and I didn't know back then that Y equals square, so I just got an Xbox controller eventually. But there's this interesting thing with controls on PC where you're not locked into one one specific ecosystem of certified controllers by the console manufacturer, so you could use tons of stuff. Normal game pads, steering wheels, flight sticks, gaming spoons? Someone please invent that. I want to eat cereal to play a game. I suppose you could even fit VR headsets and controllers into this category of unique control schemes that work on PC. But of course you can't ignore the consoles that have very unique control schemes to them. Like, I think that most PC games could end up working pretty fine with a Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Wii Sports? There's no point to playing this with anything but a Wii Remote. And even though specifically the Wii's unique control scheme has led to some of the best gaming experience of my life, I'm still giving the point for controls to PC because you get so many options that you just don't get on console. Yeah, this point goes to PC. The sheer number of games that are available on PC are seemingly endless. I suppose the one argument that could be made in favor of consoles is exclusives. But the argument that a number of great exclusive games can make a console better than PC has been getting weaker and weaker over the past couple years. Most game developers and publishers have been realizing how much people love their PCs, and as much as you only make games for consoles, you're never gonna rip certain people away from their PCs. I genuinely can't think of an Xbox exclusive game that came out in the past couple years that didn't also release on PC. Through some research, as far as I can tell, Microsoft has never made money selling a piece of Xbox hardware. They lose money on every actual physical console they sell. They make all of their money from selling games, and so they make money if you play a game on Xbox or PC. They sell Xboxes just to give you a way to buy their games. It's like Microsoft is getting you hooked and then telling you where to get your next fix. And again, even Sony has started putting a bunch of their games on PC. Horizon, God of War, Days Gone. I have heard nothing about this game, good or bad, just nothing about it. And they just announced that the whole Uncharted collection is coming to PC. The only games that really feel off limits to PC nowadays are Nintendo games. Nintendo feels very much like the Apple of the video game world, for better or for worse. Metroid Dread can only be played on Nintendo Switch, much like iMovie or Apple Reminders can only be used on Apple products. But yeah, even with the console exclusivity argument, the point still very clearly goes to PC. So whether PC or console is going to be better in price depends on your personal use case for it, so it's going to be a little bit complicated. Let's start with games. Big thing for console is you can get used games. I have no disk drive or anything on my new computer, so I can't buy any physical games for it, not that anyone makes them anymore. That being said, I think I've seen better and more frequent sales on PC games than on digital console games. I think I've really rarely ever bought something on Steam on full price, and I've never paid for anything on Epic Games. And I mean, that's what I was playing Control on. Because of this, I'm gonna call PC and console kind of even on terms of price. Console is great because you can buy used games, but it feels like there are many more options to buy games at different price points on PC. Now onto the prices of the actual hardware. For consoles, it's pretty simple. They cost this much. PCs can get a lot more complicated. Like, here's a relatively good used gaming PC I found on eBay for under $400. You're not gonna be playing Cyberpunk on here, but you could play Minecraft and GTA 5 and Rocket League on here just fine. And those alone could fill up the entire rest of your life. On the other hand, here's a PC I priced out on PC Part Picker for over $20,000. Yes, it's a stupid configuration that nobody should buy, but it serves to demonstrate there's a range in PC prices. A big argument I often hear in favor of the price of PCs is, you need a computer anyways, so you might as well get a gaming computer because you can do all your other stuff on it. And then once you got a powerful computer, you can do stuff like content creation, CAD modeling, even crunching big data sets if you're my sister. And yeah, all of that is 100% true. What do you think I'm editing this video on? What do you think I made this on? Or even this? So if I had to pick either a PC or console, yeah, of course, I'm going PC. With all the other stuff I use my computer for, plus that aforementioned seemingly endless game library, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But here's the thing, let's take a hypothetical average person and price out like a good gaming computer for them. First of all, I'd recommend a laptop instead of a desktop if that's your only computer, because, you know, you could still plug a big external monitor into it if that's what you want, but you can also take it around. From my research, a good gaming laptop that would be able to keep up with modern AAA games starts at around $1,300. but they can go way up from there. And if you're comparing PC to console, you can't really just match specs. PCs have a lot to deal with like other things going on in the background, plus the operating system itself often takes up more system resources. So to have a PC keep up with a console, you need beefier components in it. So yeah, a PC has to do everything, while a console is streamlined just to play games. So my PC is actually pretty similar in spec to a PS5. Which one is going to play better looking games in 5 years? The PS5, obviously. Plus, the more expensive PS5, the one with the disk drive, costs $500. My PC at MSRP costs about $1,750. So however you slice it, if you're just looking for gaming, you pay more for a PC than a console. On top of that, a lot of people I know just use their computer for Netflix, Google Drive, and that's about it. A powerful computer would be a waste for these people most of the time, so just getting an Xbox plus a cheap laptop that can do all the simple stuff is just a better deal for a lot of people, so I'm gonna give the point for price to consoles. Now this is the category where I think the most people are going to get the most angry at me no matter what I say. Now there are tons of huge and active PC fan bases like the aforementioned PC Master Race subreddit. Honestly, even though more of my friends play PC games than Switch games, I feel more of a connection with other Switch owners. We all have this exact same piece of hardware and we all have played a lot of the same games. Between all my friends who play PC games, we all play different stuff because every console has those couple big system seller games that everyone plays. I feel like I'm always going to have more of an attachment to the community behind a console than the community behind PCs, even though I love PCs and talking about the components and reading news about them. It is close, but I'm going to give the community point to console. Alright, so yeah, by my analysis, PC wins 4-3 in those categories, which honestly, when I got to this point in writing the script, surprised me because like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm more of a console gamer. It really might have to do with the fact that the kinds of games that I like are more often on consoles, or just the nostalgia that I have from consoles growing up, like, you know, the PS2 and the Wii. I also like a lot of Nintendo and PlayStation exclusives, so yeah, I'm gonna spend a lot of time on consoles. But I think the fact that the PC won by my analysis, and I still consider myself more of a console gamer, just goes to show there is no one definitive way that is better to play video games in every regard. It simply has to do with what you want to do. Play video games the way that you have fun. If you're playing games on a console and you're having fun, then you're playing games the right way. Don't let anyone else tell you you're wrong just because, like, your graphics look worse, or you can't play at high frame rate, or you can't connect your gaming spoons to it. Again, I want those. Even though the console wars and the battle between PC and console will always be a thing, the point of video games isn't about winning or losing based on what hardware you buy. It's about having fun playing video games, either by yourself or with your friends. And at the end of the day, really, PC and console gamers have many more similarities than they do differences. We all love great deals on games. We all hate EA. And this is the worst way to play video games.